The little girl's shoes echoed through the marble lobby as she sprinted past executives in suits, her face streaked with tears. She didn't stop at the reception desk. She didn't call out to the security guards. Instead, she ran straight to the man mopping the floor in the corner, threw her arms around his legs, and screamed words that made everyone freeze. "Please help. They beat my mom. She's dying." The janitor dropped his mop. What happened next would change everything. Anyone in that building thought they knew about the quiet man who cleaned their floors every night. Before we continue with this incredible story, if you love tales of unexpected heroism and the power of human kindness, please hit that subscribe button and ring the bell for Kindness World. Drop a like if you believe that heroes don't always wear capes, and leave a comment telling us about a time someone surprised you with an act of kindness. Now, let's get back to Marcus and little Emma. Marcus Johnson had worked as a janitor at Pinnacle Corporation for 3 years. Every evening at 6, he'd arrive with his cart, his blue uniform freshly pressed, and begin his rounds through the gleaming office building. The executives barely noticed him. To them, he was just part of the furniture, invisible as the potted plants in the lobby. They had no idea that before he pushed a mop, Marcus had pushed through medical school. They didn't know that he'd been a trauma surgeon, one of the best, until a devastating mistake during a complicated surgery had cost him his career, his license, and nearly his will to live. Marcus had chosen janitorial work deliberately. It was simple, quiet, and required nothing of the skills that had once failed him when it mattered most. He wanted to fade into the background, to never again hold someone's life in his hands. The guilt he carried was a weight that made even breathing feel like a luxury he didn't deserve. But on this particular Tuesday evening, as 7-year-old Emma Bradford, daughter of the CEO Richard Bradford, came running through those doors, the past and present collided with the force of a freight train. Emma's mother, Catherine, had been attacked in the parking garage just moments before. A robbery had gone wrong. She was barely conscious, bleeding heavily from a stab wound to her abdomen. Marcus heard himself saying words he thought he'd never say again. "Call 911, now." His voice carried an authority that made grown men jump. He was already moving, his janitorial cart forgotten, his legs carrying him toward the garage entrance where Emma was pointing with a shaking finger. What Marcus saw when he reached Catherine Bradford would have paralyzed most people. She was slumped against a concrete pillar, her blouse soaked crimson, her breathing shallow and labored. The ambulance was 10 minutes away. Maybe 15 in evening traffic. She didn't have 15 minutes. Marcus knew that the way he knew his own heartbeat. He'd seen this exact presentation dozens of times before. For 3 seconds that felt like 3 hours, Marcus stood frozen. Every logical part of his brain screamed at him to wait for the paramedics, to not risk making things worse, to remember what happened last time he'd trusted his hands with a human life. But then Emma's voice cut through his paralysis. "Please, mister. Please save my mommy." Marcus dropped to his knees beside Catherine. His hands that had scrubbed toilets and polished floors for 3 years, suddenly remembered everything. They moved with precision and purpose, checking her pulse, assessing the wound, applying pressure with his janitor's shirt that he'd ripped off without thinking. He barked orders at the gathering crowd. "You, give me your belt. You, I need your jacket. Fold it, now. Someone get me the first aid kit from the security office, run." The corporate executives who'd never learned his name scrambled to obey. They watched in stunned silence as their janitor transformed before their eyes. His hands worked with a surgeon's certainty, stemming the bleeding, stabilizing Catherine's position, monitoring her vitals with nothing but his fingertips and his trained ear. He spoke to her constantly, keeping her conscious, keeping her fighting. "Stay with me, Catherine. Stay with your daughter. Emma needs you to fight. You're doing great. Just a little longer." His voice was steady, calm, professional, everything he'd sworn he'd never be again. When the paramedics finally arrived, they found Catherine stable, her bleeding controlled, her vital signs holding. The lead paramedic took one look at Marcus's work and asked the question everyone was thinking. "Who are you?" Marcus just shook his head, his hands trembling now that the adrenaline was fading. "Just someone who was here." Catherine Bradford survived. The knife had missed her major organs by millimeters, and the emergency care she'd received in those critical first minutes had saved her life. When she woke up in the hospital 2 days later, the first thing she asked about was the man who'd helped her. The janitor whose name she'd never known. Richard Bradford found Marcus on his usual night shift, mopping the executive floor. The CEO had done his research. He knew everything now. The brilliant career, the tragic mistake, the self-imposed exile. "My wife wants to thank you," Richard said quietly. "My daughter wants to thank you. And I need to ask you a question. Why are you cleaning my floors when you could be saving lives?" Marcus looked at this powerful man and gave him the truth. "Because I was afraid. Afraid I'd fail again. Afraid my hands would forget. Afraid I didn't deserve a second chance." Richard Bradford sat down on the floor Marcus had just mopped. "My wife is alive because you got a second chance. Emma still has her mother because you were brave enough to try again. Fear is just fear, Marcus. It's not truth." 6 months later, Drive. Marcus Johnson returned to medicine. With Richard Bradford's help, he completed the required retraining, faced the medical board, and earned back his license. He now works at a trauma center, where he trains other doctors not just in surgical techniques, but in the courage it takes to keep going after failure. Emma visits him sometimes, bringing drawings and stories about her mom. Each time, she reminds him of something important. Kindness isn't always grand gestures or perfect moments. Sometimes kindness is simply choosing to try when every part of you wants to give up. It's using whatever skills you have, whatever you are in that moment, to help someone who needs you. Marcus keeps his old janitor's uniform in his office. It reminds him that every person we meet is carrying a story we don't know, fighting battles we can't see, and harboring gifts that might save us if we only take the time to truly see them. The quiet man mopping the floor might be the hero you need. The person you've overlooked might be the answer to someone's desperate prayer. That's the power of giving people second chances. That's the magic that happens when courage meets compassion. And that's why kindness, in all its forms, can change everything.